It all began on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday, a day like any other in my routine-filled life. I was sifting through my emails, the familiar rhythm of my daily activities providing a comforting backdrop when one particular message caught my eye. It was from an old friend, Sarah, someone I hadn't heard from in what felt like an eternity. The subject line read simply, "You won't believe this." My heart raced slightly at the thought of reconnecting, a mix of excitement and nostalgia flooding my senses, but a chill also ran down my spine as I opened the email, sensing that something was off. Sarah's words were cryptic, filled with an urgency that was hard to ignore. She mentioned a secret website lurking in the depths of the deep web, a place where shadows danced and whispers echoed ominously. Intrigued yet apprehensive, I read on, my curiosity piqued. As we exchanged messages over the following days, I could sense a strange intensity in her tone, as if she were trying to convey something far more profound than mere words could express. It was then that she asked me if I remembered a place we used to call the Hole. The memories flooded back with startling clarity, a hidden spot deep in the woods where we would escape the mundane realities of our everyday lives. It was our sanctuary, a place where we could truly be ourselves, away from the prying eyes of the world. But why was she bringing it up now, after all these years? What could possibly connect our innocent past to the dark web she was now entangled with? Days turned into weeks as our correspondence deepened, each email revealing more layers of her life. Sarah shared snippets of her existence, detailing her job, her travels, and her experiences, but something felt distinctly off. There was a disjointedness to her words, an underlying tension that seemed to seep through the screen. I could feel the weight of her unspoken fears lurking just beneath the surface of her carefully crafted messages. And then, she dropped another bombshell. She had been researching this mysterious website and had stumbled upon something unsettling, something that sent shivers down my spine. "Be careful," she warned me in one of her emails. "They're always watching." At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was just paranoia creeping in. But as I delved deeper into her revelations, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I began to notice odd occurrences in my own life, strange messages appearing on my social media accounts, unfamiliar faces lingering in the corners of my vision, and an inexplicable sense of being followed. The walls seemed to close in around me, and I couldn't help but feel that I was being drawn into a web far more sinister than I had anticipated. One particularly unsettling evening, after a day filled with anxiety and dread, I decided to dig into the website Sarah had mentioned. It was a labyrinth of forums and chat rooms, filled with discussions about conspiracy theories and dark secrets that sent chills down my spine. As I navigated through the digital maze, I stumbled upon a thread discussing individuals who had vanished without a trace, and my heart sank as I read about a woman who bore an uncanny resemblance to Sarah. The realization hit me like a freight train. Was she in danger? As I continued to investigate, the horrifying truth began to unfold before me. This website was more than just a collection of bizarre stories. It was a network that seemed to manipulate the lives of its users, drawing them in with promises of knowledge and freedom, only to ensnare them in a dark game. The more I read, the more I felt an oppressive weight pressing down on me, suffocating me with fear. I realized that Sarah wasn't just in danger, I might be too, caught in the crosshairs of something far beyond my understanding. I reached out to her, my fingers trembling as I typed out my concerns. "What's really going on, Sarah? Are you safe?" Her response came immediately, but it chilled me to the bone. "I can't talk about it here. They're watching. Meet me at the Hole." The words sent a jolt of fear through me, coursing through my veins like ice. The Hole was our old sanctuary, but now it felt tainted, like a ghost of our past that had been corrupted by darkness. I hesitated, my mind racing with anxiety and dread, but I knew I had to see her. That Saturday, I drove to the familiar spot, my heart pounding in my chest, anxiety gnawing at my insides like a ravenous beast. As I approached, I noticed a figure standing at the edge of the clearing. It was Sarah, but she looked different, haunted, as if the weight of the world rested heavily on her shoulders. I rushed to her, enveloping her in a tight embrace, desperate to reassure myself that she was real, that she was safe. "Sarah, what's happening?" I asked, pulling back to look into her eyes. They were filled with a mix of relief and terror, a potent cocktail of emotions that made my heart ache for her. "I've been trying to escape them," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting someone to emerge from the shadows at any moment. "They know everything about us. They've been watching since 1999. My mind raced as I processed her words. 1999? That was the year she disappeared from my life. The year we lost touch, a year that now felt like a dark omen. "Who are they?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might draw their attention. "The website," she replied, her voice trembling with fear. "It's a cult of sorts. They draw people in, manipulate them, and then..." Suddenly, a rustling in the bushes interrupted her. We both froze, our hearts pounding in unison as we exchanged terrified glances. I scanned the area, but all I could see were the trees swaying gently in the breeze, their leaves whispering secrets I could not decipher. "Let's go," I urged, grabbing her hand tightly, feeling the urgency of the moment. We ran, the familiar path now feeling foreign and menacing, each step echoing with the weight of our fear. As we reached my car, I glanced back, half expecting to see someone following us, lurking in the shadows. But the woods were silent, as if holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Once we were safely inside the car, I turned to Sarah, my voice filled with urgency. "We need to go to the police. They can help us." Her expression darkened, a shadow crossing her features. "No. They're part of it. We can't trust anyone." Panic surged within me, crashing over me like a wave. If we couldn't trust the authorities, who could we turn to for help? That night, we stayed up late, poring over everything we could find about the website, our minds racing with fear and determination. The more we uncovered, the more the pieces of this twisted puzzle began to fall into place. It was a web of manipulation, control, and fear. People were drawn in by promises of freedom and knowledge, only to become pawns in a sinister game orchestrated by unseen hands. As dawn broke, casting a pale light across the room, I felt a sense of determination rise within me. "We have to expose them," I said, my voice steady and resolute. "If we can gather enough evidence, we can bring them down." Sarah nodded, her eyes flickering with a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. "But we have to be careful. They'll be watching us now, more than ever." In the following weeks, we worked tirelessly, gathering information and documenting everything we found, each new discovery adding weight to our resolve. But the more we dug, the more unsettling things became. I started receiving anonymous messages, taunting me, warning me to stop my investigation, and each one sent chills down my spine. One evening, as I was going through our findings, I received a call from an unknown number. My heart raced as I answered, only to hear a distorted voice on the other end. "You're in over your head. Leave it alone." I hung up, trembling with fear and uncertainty. "Sarah, they're getting to me. I don't know how much longer I can do this." "We have to keep going," she insisted, her voice firm and unwavering. "We can't let them win." Not now, not ever. But as we pressed on, the situation spiraled further out of control. Sarah began to change. She became more withdrawn, haunted by the shadows of her past that seemed to loom larger with each passing day. I could see the toll it was taking on her, and it broke my heart to witness her suffering. Then, one night, she disappeared. I woke up to find her gone, a chilling emptiness where her presence had been just hours before. Panic surged through me as I searched the house, calling her name, but there was no response, only the echo of my own voice bouncing back at me in the silence. Desperate, I turned to the website, hoping to find some clue about her whereabouts. It was a dark rabbit hole, filled with threads discussing her disappearance, as if they were waiting for this moment to unfold. I felt a sickening realization wash over me. She was becoming one of them, just like the others who had fallen into their trap. I spent the next few days in a haze, consumed by fear and guilt. I should have protected her. I should have done more to keep her safe. But deep down, I knew I had to keep fighting, not just for Sarah, but for everyone who had fallen victim to this insidious network that seemed to thrive on fear and despair. Finally, I decided to confront the website head-on. I created a fake identity, posing as someone interested in their community. As I navigated through the forums, I felt a mix of dread and determination coursing through my veins. I had to find out what they had done to Sarah, and I was willing to do whatever it took. Days turned into weeks as I infiltrated their ranks, gathering information and piecing together the puzzle of their twisted operations. I discovered that they had a physical location, a place where they conducted their rituals and brainwashed their followers into submission. With this information in hand, I knew I had to act swiftly. I contacted a journalist I trusted, someone who had a reputation for exposing dark secrets and bringing the truth to light. Together, we devised a plan to infiltrate the cult and rescue Sarah from their clutches. The night of the operation was fraught with tension and anticipation. We arrived at the location, a decrepit building shrouded in darkness and secrecy. As we entered, I felt a sense of foreboding wash over me, but I pushed it aside. I had to find Sarah. I had to bring her back. We navigated through the dimly lit hallways, the air thick with the scent of decay and despair. The sounds of chanting echoed around us, sending chills down my spine and heightening my sense of urgency. Finally, we reached a large room where a group of hooded figures stood in a circle, their voices rising in a chilling harmony that reverberated off the walls. In the center lay Sarah, unconscious and surrounded by flickering candles that cast eerie shadows on her pale face. "Sarah!" I shouted, rushing forward, my heart pounding with desperation. The figures turned, their faces obscured by shadows, their intentions hidden behind their dark hoods. Panic surged as they lunged toward us, but we fought back, adrenaline pumping through our veins, propelling us forward in our fight for survival. In the chaos, I managed to reach Sarah, shaking her awake with urgency. "We're getting out of here," I urged, my voice filled with determination. As we made our escape, I could feel the weight of their gaze upon us, the realization that we were breaking free from their grasp and reclaiming our lives. Once outside, we ran, not stopping until we reached the safety of the car, the night air filled with the sound of our racing hearts. As we drove away, I glanced back, the building fading into the distance, a haunting reminder of the darkness we had just escaped. In the following days, we worked tirelessly with the journalist to expose the cult, our efforts fueled by a shared sense of purpose. The truth came crashing down like a tidal wave, and as the world learned of their sinister activities, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. We had fought back against the darkness, and we had won, at least for now. But the scars remained. Sarah was still haunted by her experiences, and I knew it would take time for her to heal completely. We leaned on each other, finding solace in our shared trauma and the bond that had been forged in the fires of adversity. As I reflect on this journey, I realize that the echoes of the abyss will always linger, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface, waiting for an opportunity to ensnare the unwary. But together, we emerged stronger, determined to fight against the shadows that threaten to consume us and those we care about. And as long as we have each other, we will continue to shine a light in the darkness, refusing to be silenced by the echoes of the past, determined to forge a future free from the chains of fear and manipulation. We will stand together, vigilant against the shadows, ready to confront whatever challenges may come our way. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. As I begin to recount these deeply unsettling experiences, a shiver runs down my spine, for these memories are not mere figments of imagination or the products of a vivid dream. They are threads intricately woven into the fabric of my reality, instances where the veil between safety and danger flickered ominously, leaving me breathless and filled with dread in their wake. Each recollection brings back the feelings of vulnerability and fear that I experienced during those moments, and as I write this, I can't help but feel the weight of those memories pressing down on me. One seemingly unremarkable evening, I found myself at a friend's house, waiting for him to return from the store. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, and a peculiar unease settled over me like a heavy fog that refused to lift. As I sat in the dimly lit living room, the ticking of the clock echoed in my ears, each tick amplifying my growing sense of discomfort. Suddenly, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of boots clattering against the wooden floor, a sound that sent my heart racing. Could it be my friend returning? I called out his name, but no voice answered me. The house remained eerily still, as if it were holding its breath. I strained to listen, and again the sound came, louder this time, moving purposefully from the hallway into the living room. Panic gripped me tightly. I knew his parents were away for the weekend, a fact I had dismissed in my previous comfort, but now it loomed large in my mind. Summoning every ounce of courage, I crept toward the source of the sound, gripping my phone tightly, ready to dial for help if necessary. The hall was dark, shadows cast long and distorted by the flicker of the dim bulb above, creating an atmosphere thick with foreboding. I called out again, my voice trembling as it echoed against the walls. No answer came. I took a deep breath, attempting to steady myself, and stepped forward cautiously. As I rounded the corner, my breath caught in my throat. There was no one there. The house was undeniably empty, and the realization of being utterly alone sank in like a stone in my stomach, making every hair on my body stand on end. I hurried back to the living room, my mind racing through every horror movie I had ever seen, each scene flashing vividly in my memory. Perhaps my imagination was playing tricks on me, but then again, what if it wasn't? The thought was chilling. A few months later, my friends and I decided to escape to the wilderness for a weekend camping trip, eager to disconnect from the chaos of our daily lives and immerse ourselves in nature. We laughed around the fire, sharing stories under the stars, the warmth of the flames providing cozy comfort against the chill of the night. However, as the hours wore on, an unsettling unease began to creep in, wrapping around us like a thick fog. We felt it before we saw it, a sense of being watched, an intangible pressure that weighed heavily on our shoulders. We brushed it off at first as paranoia typical of campers in the dark woods, but the feeling grew, crawling over our skin like icy fingers, sending shivers down our spines. As I turned to glance into the shadows beyond our campfire, I spotted a figure standing at the edge of the trees, its outline barely discernible in the dim light. My stomach dropped, a cold knot forming within me. I nudged my boyfriend, whispering urgently about the shadowy form lurking just beyond our sight. We both strained to catch a better look, but it melted back into the darkness, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. Uneasiness spiraled into terror as we discussed whether we should confront the figure or simply pack up and leave the area. Everything within me screamed to run, to flee the unknown threat, but we hesitated, caught between the instinct to escape and the need to investigate the unsettling presence. Suddenly, the figure re-emerged, closer this time, a cold glint of something metallic reflecting off the firelight, and fear propelled us into action. We packed our tent with trembling hands, adrenaline surging through our veins, and just as we finished, we heard footsteps crunching on the underbrush, the unmistakable sound of someone approaching. Panic surged through us as we darted into the car, barely managing to slam the door shut before my boyfriend hit the gas and we tore away from the campsite. In the rearview mirror, I glimpsed movement in the trees, and I knew that feeling of being watched would haunt me long after we left that cursed campsite, echoing in my mind like a ghostly whisper. Fast forward to a bright summer day. I found myself in the park with my best friend, Iris, walking two dogs we had taken in from a nearby shelter. The sun shone brightly overhead, and laughter filled the air as the dogs bounded joyfully ahead of us, their tails wagging with excitement. Yet, despite the cheerful atmosphere, a shroud of unease lingered, one that we couldn't quite shake, like a dark cloud hovering just above our heads. As we rounded a bend in the path, I noticed a man standing off to the side, watching us intently. His gaze was fixed, too intense, and instantly, I felt a tightness in my chest that told me something was wrong. Something was off about his presence. I nudged Iris, my voice barely above a whisper, "Look at that guy over there." She glanced over, her expression shifting from casual enjoyment to one of concern and alarm. With each step we took, I felt his eyes on us, a cold weight that set our nerves on edge, as if we were being hunted. "Should we turn back?" Iris suggested, glancing around for other people, her voice laced with anxiety. I nodded, sensing the urgency in her tone, and we started to retrace our steps, our hearts pounding in our chests. Just then, I noticed the man had begun to follow us, moving at a steady pace, always keeping a distance, but somehow, it felt like he was closing in. Panic enveloped us like a thick blanket, and we picked up our pace, trying to appear nonchalant while our hearts raced uncontrollably. The dogs, usually so carefree and playful, sensed our distress and barked nervously, their instincts mirroring our fear. Fear coursed through me as we darted into a crowded area of the park, the throngs of people providing a brief sense of safety, a temporary sanctuary from the unknown threat. The man halted on the outskirts, lingering just out of reach, watching us intently with an unsettling intensity before finally turning away. The relief that flooded through us was overwhelming, but the lingering dread of being so close to danger was a heavy shadow that overshadowed our day, a reminder that safety can be an illusion. Finally, there was the night I'll never forget, a night that remains etched in my memory. I had just moved into my first apartment, an old building with creaking floors and fluttering curtains, a place I had hoped would be my sanctuary. But that night, something felt off, as if the walls themselves were whispering secrets. Alone and exhausted from the day's chaos, I fell asleep on the couch, the hum of the city lulling me into a false sense of security, a deceptive comfort that would soon shatter. Suddenly, I was jolted awake by a sound, a soft scuffle, something dragging across the hardwood floor, a noise that sent my heart racing and my instincts screaming. My mind raced as I realized I wasn't alone in the apartment. I reached for my phone, the screen illuminating my surroundings, creating eerie shadows that danced in the corners of the room. The quiet was suffocating, and fear wrapped its icy fingers around my throat, tightening with every passing second. I slowly rose, inching toward the noise, my mind racing through the possibilities of what could be lurking in the dark. Was it just my imagination? But with every creak of the floor, the noise grew more definitive, closer, more menacing. I took a deep breath and called out, "Hello?" My voice trembled as it echoed in the silence, and for a brief moment, dread settled heavily in the air, thick and palpable. Then, the noise stopped completely, plunging me into an eerie silence that felt suffocating. I felt a chill sweep through me, and as I stood there, rooted in place, I could feel a presence behind me, an awareness that sent my heart racing. Turning slowly, the flicker from my phone revealed a shadow at the edge of my bedroom door, a dark shape that sent a rush of terror coursing through me. My mind screamed for me to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor, paralyzed by fear. In a moment of clarity, I flipped on the nearby lamp, bathing the room in light, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadow vanished, slipping away like a wisp of smoke, and my heartbeat thundered in my ears, echoing the panic that surged within me. I knew right then that someone or something had been there, and as I dialed for help, the reality that my sanctuary had become a place of fear solidified within me, a harsh truth that shattered my sense of safety. These stories of encounters etched themselves into my memory, a constant reminder of the lurking dangers that exist around each corner, waiting for the right moment to strike. They teach us to pay attention, to trust our instincts, and to be aware that sometimes, the scariest monsters are not those crafted in stories to frighten us, but those we face in our true lives, often hiding in plain sight, waiting for the unsuspecting to let their guard down. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. As the last lecture of the day wrapped up, I gathered my belongings, shoving my notebook and pens into my bag with a sense of urgency. Stepping out of the lecture hall, the chatter of my classmates faded into a distant hum behind me, the echoes of their laughter and conversations dissipating into the evening air. The university campus, which was usually a vibrant hub filled with the sounds of students enjoying their lives, now felt eerie and desolate under the dim glow of the streetlights. It was a Friday night, and most students had already departed for various parties and gatherings, leaving the paths quiet and somewhat lonely, almost hauntingly so. I sighed heavily, pulling my jacket tighter around me as the autumn chill began to seep into the air, wrapping around me like a cold embrace. My dorm was a good 15-minute walk from the main campus, and I had made this trek countless times before. Usually, it felt mundane, almost comforting, a routine I had grown accustomed to. But tonight, an unsettling sensation hung in the air, a palpable tension that seemed to thicken with each step I took. I brushed it off as exhaustion creeping in from a long week filled with classes and studying, convincing myself that I was simply tired. As I walked down the well-lit path that snaked through the trees, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The sensation started subtly, just a prickling at the back of my neck, but as I continued, it intensified until it became a full-blown anxiety gnawing at my insides. I quickened my pace, my shoes crunching against the gravel, the sound echoing in the stillness of the night. Each step felt heavier, as if the ground beneath me was urging me to turn back. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of a figure. A man stood a few paces behind me, partially obscured by the shadows cast by the trees. I instinctively glanced over my shoulder, but he seemed to blend into the darkness, his features hidden from view. Nervously, I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, that I was simply being paranoid. To distract myself, I picked up my phone and half-heartedly scrolled through my messages, hoping to find something that would ease my mind while I walked faster. I had just decided to call my roommate when I heard a soft footfall behind me, an unmistakable sound that sent a chill rushing down my spine. I glanced back again, and the man was still there, slightly closer now, his presence looming larger in my mind. My breath quickened, panic setting in. Was he actually following me? I darted down a side path that led towards the main entrance of my dorm, the bright lights from the building shining like a beacon of hope in the growing darkness. But the movement of the man behind me felt too close for comfort, too threatening. I didn't dare look back now. Instead, I focused on my destination, heart racing in my chest, each beat a loud drum urging me to run faster, to escape the feeling of dread that clung to me like a shadow. The wind howled, rustling the leaves around me, and I could hear distant laughter from a party nearby, the sounds of joy feeling so far away, so disconnected from my reality at that moment. I reached the entrance, fumbling for my keycard as I glanced over my shoulder one last time. My heart sank as I saw the man standing a short distance away, watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. His face was still obscured, but I could feel the weight of his gaze, a spotlight illuminating my fear. With trembling hands, I finally swiped my keycard and pushed through the door, slamming it shut behind me with a sense of urgency. I leaned against it, breathing heavily, trying to calm the storm of panic that was raging inside me. I looked around the lobby, seeking comfort in the common sight of students gathered, chatting and laughing, blissfully oblivious to the fear that now coursed through me like ice water. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. I had to know. I slipped into the common area and crept towards the large glass windows that overlooked the entrance, my heart pounding in my chest. As I peered outside, my heart sank further into despair. The man was still there, now standing under the awning, his face finally visible in the dim light. He was older than me, perhaps in his late 20s, with a scruffy beard and an unsettling smile that sent shivers down my spine. He seemed oddly relaxed, as if he were waiting for something, no, waiting for someone. My stomach twisted into knots as the horrifying realization hit me. I was that someone. I backed away from the window, the reality of the situation crashing over me like a wave, pulling me under. My phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me back to the present moment. It was a message from my roommate, asking if I was back yet, but I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the screen. I wanted to reply, to reach out for help, but all I could think of was the man outside, the threat he represented. I couldn't just stand there like a deer caught in headlights. My instincts screamed at me to stay away from the windows, to find a safe place, to hide. I decided to head back to my room, where I could lock the door and breathe. As I hurried down the hallway towards the stairs, I felt a presence behind me again. I turned, half expecting to see the man from outside creeping up on me, but it was just another student, mumbling an apology as they brushed past. I took a deep breath, feeling foolish for allowing my imagination to run wild, but the feeling of dread still clung to me like a second skin. I climbed the stairs two at a time, eager to reach my room, to lock the door and escape into the safety of familiarity. As I finally reached my floor, a knot of fear formed in my stomach again. What if he had followed me here? I hesitated in front of my door, heart racing as I fumbled with my key. What felt like an eternity passed before I finally managed to unlock it and slip inside, closing the door quickly behind me. I leaned against it, taking a moment to collect myself, to calm the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. I pulled out my phone and texted my roommate, desperately urging her to return and not to take her time. As I sat on my bed, I tried to calm my breathing, pulling my knees up to my chest, seeking comfort in my own embrace. I glanced out of my window, half expecting to see that familiar figure watching me again, lurking in the shadows. But the street below was empty, devoid of life. Perhaps I was overreacting. Perhaps he was just a random guy, and I had let fear warp my perception of reality. I wrapped myself in a blanket, trying to shake off the creepiness of the evening, the chill that had settled in my bones. An hour ticked by, and my heart finally began to normalize, the frantic beats slowing to a more manageable rhythm. I pored over my homework, attempting to forget the earlier incident, when suddenly, I heard a noise that made my heart stop dead in its tracks. A soft knock at my door. My heart raced again as I glanced up, frozen in place. Who could it be? My roommate had a key. She wouldn't knock. A second knock, slightly louder this time, reverberated through my room. I shot up, anxiety coursing through me again, flooding my veins with fear. I crept towards the door, the fear pooling in my stomach like a heavy stone. I peered through the peephole, my breath caught in my throat, panic settling in. It was him. My mind raced as I backed away from the door, my heart pounding in my chest. How did he find me? Panic overwhelmed me, and I quickly moved to my window, glancing outside, but the hallway was dark and empty, the shadows playing tricks on my eyes. Should I call for help? Should I call campus security? I decided I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of knowing he scared me. Instead, I graduated into survival mode, my instincts taking over. I grabbed my phone and quietly dialed campus security, whispering about the situation, feeling utterly paranoid and terrified. They assured me they would send someone over immediately, their calm voices a small comfort amidst the chaos in my mind. I felt a flicker of relief, but it was short-lived as I heard another knock followed by a voice that made my blood run cold. Open up. I just want to talk. His voice was eerily calm, but it sent jolts of terror through my body, making my heart race even faster. My breath quickened as I backed away from the door, my instincts screaming at me to hide. I can see you in there. Don't be afraid. He chuckled, a sickly sweet sound that made my skin crawl. I just want to chat. I promise I won't hurt you. Go away. I shouted back, my voice shaky but fueled by adrenaline. I could hear him inhaling sharply, almost as if he were savoring my fear, feeding off it. You're being ridiculous. I'm not here to harm you. You're just making it worse for yourself. My thoughts raced to my self-defense classes, but I remembered the only thing I was trained to do was to get away, to escape. I got on my bed and edged towards the window, peering out again, my heart pounding in my chest. There was no sign of campus security yet, and the seconds felt like hours. Let's not make this difficult, okay? I can see you moving around. You're making me anxious. His voice turned dark, and with it, a cold shiver ran down my spine, the hairs on my arms standing on end. I heard him shift, the sound of his weight pressing against the door as he leaned in closer, his presence suffocating. My breath quickened, and I felt my heart racing against my ribcage, a wild drumbeat of fear. Please, I just want to help you, he said softly, but there was nothing comforting in his tone. You look so alone up there. I forced myself to stay quiet, hoping he would just go away, that somehow he would lose interest. The seconds stretched on, each one feeling like an eternity, and just as despair began to set in, I heard the sound of footsteps approaching, a glimmer of hope piercing through my fear. My heart leaped as a pair of security officers appeared at my door, their presence a welcomed sight. "Ma'am, are you inside?" "We're here to help," one of them called out, their authoritative voices cutting through the tension. Relief flooded over me, a wave of gratitude washing away some of the fear. "Open up!" the man outside shouted back, his voice dropping an octave, now filled with anger and desperation. "You don't need them. Just let me in. Stay away from the door." I yelled back, my voice steadier now, fueled by the presence of the officers. "Ma'am, we need you to open the door," one of the officers urged carefully, his tone firm yet gentle, trying to reassure me. I released a breath I didn't know I was holding and, with shaky hands, I unlocked the door and opened it just a crack. The sight of the officers standing there felt like a lifeline, a safety net that I desperately needed. "Ma'am, we need you to step back and let us in," the other officer said assertively, positioning himself in front of me protectively, creating a barrier between me and the man outside. The man glared at the officers, his face twisting in rage and frustration. "You can't protect her from me," he spat, his voice filled with venom. "Back away from the door," one of the officers commanded, his tone firm as they stepped inside, their presence a solid wall between me and the man. "Sir, this is your only warning," the officer continued, his voice unwavering. "Step away, or we will take action." The man scoffed, but I could see the uncertainty creeping into his demeanor, his bravado faltering in the face of authority. He took a step back, glancing around the dimly lit corridor, weighing his options. "Fine," he spat, his voice brimming with hostility. "You've won for now, but this isn't over." And with that, he turned and fled down the hall, the sound of his footsteps fading away into the distance, leaving behind a heavy silence. The officers turned to me, their expressions softening as they assessed my state. "Are you all right?" one asked gently, concern etched on his face. I nodded, feeling a wave of dizziness wash over me, the adrenaline finally beginning to fade. I was safe, for the moment, and that realization felt like a warm blanket wrapping around me. "Thank you," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper, full of gratitude. They stayed with me for a while, ensuring I was okay, taking down details about the man who had been following me, their professionalism grounding me amidst the chaos. I felt the adrenaline slowly dissipate, but the fear remained lodged deep inside, a reminder of the night's events. No one should have to feel this afraid, I thought as they left me in my room, locking the door behind them. Alone again, I sank down onto my bed, the events of the evening replaying in my mind like a broken record, each moment haunting me. That man had preyed on my fear, using it against me, and I felt a sense of violation I had never experienced before, a vulnerability that left me shaken to my core. I promised myself I wouldn't let it define me, but deep down, I knew that this shadow would linger, haunting my steps on the quiet nights ahead, a specter that would not easily fade. As I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, I told myself I would report the incident, ensure my safety in the future, and take every precaution necessary to protect myself. But for now, I was just grateful to feel the weight of the world lift slightly from my shoulders as sleep finally began to claim me, bolstered by the knowledge that I was no longer alone in the darkness, that I had taken steps to reclaim my sense of safety. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I remember that fateful day in the vast forests of the American West as if it were etched into my memory, the details vivid and haunting. The sun hung high in the sky, its golden rays streaming through the towering pines, creating a beautiful mosaic of light and shade on the forest floor. My family and I were filled with the kind of excitement that accompanies a joyful outing dedicated to gathering firewood. There was a sense of camaraderie and adventure in the air. It was a perfect day for exploration. My father, a sturdy and weathered man with hands like tree bark, took the lead as we ventured deeper into the woods. He had always been our guide, strong and unwavering, instilling confidence in us as we set off into the heart of nature. The promise of warmth from the campfire later that evening, where we planned to roast marshmallows and share ghost stories under the blanket of stars, seemed almost palpable. However, as we ventured further from the familiar trails that seemed to embrace us, an odd tension began to settle over the forest and over us. It was an unsettling sensation, akin to a ripple of apprehension hanging in the air, as if the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting. I looked at my little brother, who was happily engaged in skipping rocks along the edge of a stream, blissfully unaware of the chill that had begun to creep into the atmosphere. My mother, usually the beacon of strength and calm in our family, was quieter than I had ever seen her, her eyes darting nervously, scanning our surroundings with an unsettling vigilance that did not escape my notice. As we hiked deeper into the woods, the lush greenery around us began to take on a more unnerving appearance. Suddenly, we stumbled upon the lifeless body of a deer, its once graceful form sprawled out on the forest floor, a stark reminder of nature's harsh realities. The sight sent a cold wave of unease through our small party. Its glassy eyes seemed to stare into an abyss, reflecting nothing of the vibrant life it once held, while its stillness made it feel like a macabre part of the very earth we were trotting upon. I could see my father's brow furrow in a way I had rarely witnessed before. It was a look that conveyed the fear bubbling beneath his stoic exterior as he visually processed what lay before us. "We should head back," he said, his authoritative tone tinged with an unusual hesitation that sent another wave of apprehension rippling through us. Reluctantly yet obediently, we gathered our provisions for the evening, our thoughts now heavy with the weight of the day's events and the unsettling encounter. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, the previously warm golden light began to transform into eerie hues of orange and purple, casting long, haunting shadows that seemed to reach out like fingers over the forest floor. I could feel a knot tightening in my stomach, the instinctual alarm bells ringing louder as darkness encroached, bringing with it a thick, unsettling quiet. The chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves we had come to enjoy faded into an oppressive silence that felt almost tangible. It was in that rare, hushed moment of silence that we were abruptly jarred into reality by a sound, a sharp, piercing scream that echoed through the trees with such chilling clarity it felt like a knife slicing through the tranquility. My heart raced in response, a primal instinct springing to life within me that compelled me to flee as quickly and as far as I could. We exchanged terrified glances, the terror in my brother's wide eyes reflected in my own, while my mother squeezed my father's arm, her knuckles white with anxiety. The scream was unlike anything I had ever encountered, a raw, anguished cry that reverberated through the woods and sent icy shivers cascading down my spine. "We need to go, now," my father commanded, his voice firm yet strained, and I knew we had no choice but to obey. We scrambled back towards the path, but the encroaching darkness made everything feel disorienting and unfamiliar. The towering trees loomed tall and ominous, their twisted branches resembling bony fingers reaching eagerly towards us as though they intended to ensnare us in their grip. I could almost feel their insidious gaze upon us, as if they were watching and waiting, as the weight of the night pressed down around us like an inescapable fog. Once we finally reached our campsite, we were relieved to see the flickering fire, which became our only source of comfort, a beacon pushing back against the suffocating terror that lurked beyond its reach. The crackling flames cast dancing shadows that played tricks on our minds, warping our senses, and we huddled close together, desperately trying to dismiss the overwhelming sense of dread that enveloped us like a thick cloud. But even as the fire blazed bright and warm, a nagging feeling of vulnerability clung to us, wrapping around us as tightly as a shroud. That particular night, the forest was a cacophony of unsettling sounds. Whispers slithered through the trees, mixing with the wind that howled and carried ghostly echoes that sent chills up our spines. Each time a twig snapped or a leaf rustled, I felt myself jump, the fear burrowing deep into my bones. I listened intently to the stories from other campers nearby, who also seemed to share our growing unease, recounting their encounters with the strange occurrences that plagued the woods. One couple described their terrifying encounter with eerie lights that floated just above the tree line, moving gracefully, as if dancing to some macabre, silent tune that only they could hear. Another family recounted their horrifying experience of hearing heavy footsteps in the dead of night, the chilling realization hitting them that they were utterly alone in their campsite. They spoke of an overwhelming sensation of being watched, of shadows blending seamlessly with the darkness around them, lurking just beyond the fire's warm glow. The more we listened to their stories, the deeper our anxiety took root, intertwining with our very thoughts and emotions, consuming us with each shared tale. In the following days, while we desperately sought solace in the daylight, we tried to brush our fears aside, to convince ourselves that what we had experienced was merely our imagination. Yet, every snap of a twig made us flinch, every distant rustle of leaves sent us into a silent panic, our minds racing with possibilities. My father, determined to shake off the weight and heaviness that had settled over our spirits like a dense fog, suggested, "Let's take a hike tomorrow, deeper into the woods. We can shake this off and reclaim the joy of our trip," he insisted, though I could see the uncertainty flickering in his eyes as he spoke. The next day, we ventured out again, hesitantly trying to reclaim what little remained of our sense of adventure. Nonetheless, the woods around us began to feel increasingly alien and unfamiliar. We stumbled upon remnants of a campsite long abandoned, rusty cans, old plastic utensils, and tattered fishing line tangled hopelessly in the underbrush. It felt as if the forest was slowly reclaiming it all, a slow, patient process of erasure that felt eerie and foreboding. As we walked further, an unsettling sensation of being followed crept over me, a tingling awareness that clawed at my skin, and I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes unseen were watching us from the shadows. Suddenly, my brother came to an abrupt stop, his face pale and filled with dread. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, his voice trembling with fear. In response, a deep, low growl resonated in the depths of the forest, a low rumble that vibrated ominously through the ground beneath our feet. My heart raced uncontrollably, fear swept over me like a dark wave. We turned to flee, darting back towards our campsite, the echoing growl following us ominously, reverberating off the trees that lined our path. When we arrived, my mother was already inside the tent, frantically packing our belongings as my father attempted to calm her, his own fear breaking through the bravado he had so carefully maintained for our sake. Every moment felt stretched out, time constricting around us like a noose. The sun hung high in the sky, yet it did little to lift the ominous weight pressing on our shoulders. We were completely unnerved. The once inviting forest had revealed its darker, more sinister heart, something we could not ignore any longer. As night fell, the golden hues of sunset rapidly faded, casting the woods into a dark, foreboding shadow. Once more, the unsettling sounds arose, branches snapping in the dark, distant cries cutting through the still air, and that dreadful, unshakable sensation of being watched intensified. In a desperate attempt to distract ourselves from the heaviness in our hearts, we gathered around the fire once more, hoping its warmth would stave off our fears. We told ghost stories, weaving tales of things that lurked just beyond the edge of our vision, but even our laughter felt hollow amidst the oppressive gloom that surrounded us. My father suggested we go for a walk, hoping that the fresh air would ease the suffocating tension that enveloped us. We walked in silence, the winding paths cloaked in shadows illuminated only by the faint light of the moon overhead. Suddenly, we came across a clearing unlike any we had seen before, illuminated by a strange, glowing light that pulsated rhythmically, casting an unsettling luminescence over the landscape. We stood frozen, captivated yet terrified, as the normal sounds of the forest faded into an eerie hush. As we stepped closer, the light flickered violently and then vanished abruptly, plunging us into darkness with an overwhelming sense of loss. Panic surged through me, and in that moment, clarity struck. We had to leave this place. We need to go back. Now! I cried out, my voice trembling as fear clawed at my throat. We turned and ran, the sound of our footfalls melding with an unearthly wail that pierced the fabric of night, ricocheting off the trees. My heart raced furiously as we dashed through the forest, the sheer terror propelling us forward relentlessly. At long last, we reached our campsite, breathless and utterly terrified. My father moved quickly, gathering our belongings with a frantic urgency propelled by primal fear. The shadows around us twisted ominously, shrouding our camp in an almost claustrophobic grip, as if the forest itself conspired to close in on us. We scarcely exchanged words as we packed up, our hands trembling with anxiety, the urgency of our escape palpable in the air like a charged storm. It felt as if the forest, once welcoming, had turned hostile, urging us to leave before it could consume us whole. As we drove away from that haunting place, the echoes of screams and growls haunted my thoughts, an unshakable reminder of our terrifying experience. I looked back at the woods, the towering trees now shrouded in an impenetrable darkness, a silent witness to our panic. I couldn't help but feel that the forest would continue its whispers, the hidden dangers lurking within its depths, patiently waiting for the next unwitting family to wander into its ominous embrace. What was intended to be a joyful family trip had morphed into a nightmare, a sprawling reminder of the untamed wilderness and the unspoken stories it held within. I glanced at my brother, who now sat silently in the back seat, his face pale and drawn, the excitement of the trip replaced by the shadows of fear that loomed over us. I understood then that we would never return to those woods, and perhaps that was for the best. As we drove further away, I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere within those darkened trees, something, an ever-watchful presence, watched us leave, lying in wait, patient for the next chapter in its bitter, sinister tale. The whispers of the woods would undoubtedly continue, carrying with them the echoes of fear and the unsolved mysteries of the unknown. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. It was a crisp Halloween night when I found myself drifting into the depths of memories that continue to haunt me, even years later. I was just 16 at the time, bubbling with the reckless bravado that only youth can provide. My sister, Emily, along with a couple of close friends, had managed to convince me to join them for a night filled with the excitement of trick-or-treating. The air was thick with the rich scent of fallen leaves, and the distant sound of laughter echoed down the street, mingling seamlessly with the rustle of costumes and the occasional shriek of delight from other children. It was a night that was supposed to be filled with fun and joy, but beneath the festive atmosphere lay a tension I couldn't quite shake off. As we wandered through the dimly lit neighborhood, the moon hung high in the sky, casting eerie shadows that danced along the pavement. We were dressed as witches, our flowing black capes billowing dramatically behind us as we skipped from house to house, collecting candy and sharing stories of ghosts and ghouls that sent shivers down our spines. It was a night that was meant to be magical, yet a nagging feeling crept up my spine, whispering that something was amiss. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking in the darkness, but all I could see was the faint glow of jack-o'-lanterns flickering in the distance, their grinning faces illuminated by candles within. That's when I noticed it, a black truck parked a few houses down, its engine idling softly in the stillness of the night. Initially, I shrugged it off, thinking it was just another neighbor's vehicle, perhaps waiting for trick-or-treaters to approach. But as we continued our trek, I caught sight of it again, this time much closer, as if it had moved without my noticing. A chill ran through me, and I shared my growing unease with Emily and our friends. They laughed it off, attributing my feelings to the spooky atmosphere of the night, brushing aside my concerns as mere childish fears. But deep down, I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that we were being watched, as if unseen eyes were following our every move. As we turned down a quieter street, the laughter that had filled the air faded, replaced by an oppressive silence, the shadows around us growing thicker and more foreboding. It was then that I realized the truck was now directly behind us, moving slowly, its headlights cutting through the darkness like a predator stalking its unsuspecting prey. My heart began to race, and I could feel the adrenaline surging through my veins, urging me to run, to escape whatever threat was lurking behind us. "We should get out of here," I whispered urgently to Emily, my voice barely audible over the sound of our hurried footsteps. Without waiting for a response, I took off, sprinting down the street with Emily and our friends close behind me. The sound of the truck's engine grew louder, menacingly close, and I could hear the tires crunching against the gravel as it followed us with an unyielding persistence. Panic set in, and I could feel my breath quickening, each inhale a desperate plea for safety. We turned onto a side street, hoping to lose the truck in the maze of houses, but it was relentless, its headlights illuminating the night like a spotlight searching for its prey. "Keep running!" Emily shouted, her voice filled with fear and urgency. I could see the terror etched in her eyes as we raced through the darkness, the shadows closing in around us. A sharp pain shot through my side, but I pushed through it, driven purely by instinct and the primal need to survive. We were no longer just kids out for candy, we had become prey, and the hunter was closing in, intent on catching us. Then, in an instant, it happened. I stumbled, my foot catching on an uneven patch of pavement, and I fell hard to the ground, the rough surface scraping against my skin. I turned to look back, and that's when I saw him, a man emerging from the truck, his face obscured by the darkness, his intentions unclear but undoubtedly menacing. He was tall, with a presence that radiated danger, sending a jolt of fear coursing through my veins. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline flooding my system, but it felt like it was too late. He lunged at me, and I barely managed to dodge him, my heart pounding in my chest like a wild drum. I could hear Emily screaming in the background, her voice echoing in my ears as I darted away, my cape snagging on a fence as I tried to escape. I felt the fabric tear, a painful reminder of my vulnerability, but I couldn't stop. I had to keep moving, had to escape this nightmare that was unfolding around me. I ran through the yard of a nearby house, the grass wet beneath my feet, each step feeling like a desperate gamble for survival. I could hear the man cursing behind me, his words lost in the chaos of my racing thoughts. I didn't look back, I couldn't afford to. My mind raced with thoughts of survival, of getting away from this terrifying situation. I burst through a hedge and into the next street, my breath coming in ragged gasps, but I could still hear the truck's engine revving ominously in the distance, a haunting reminder of the danger that pursued us. Suddenly, I stumbled upon a group of other trick-or-treaters, their laughter a stark contrast to the terror that gripped me. I rushed to them, my heart racing wildly, and yelled for help, desperation coloring my voice. The kids turned, their faces a mix of confusion and concern, but the man was still behind me, his footsteps echoing ominously in the night. I felt a surge of relief wash over me as adults joined us, their presence acting as a shield against the encroaching darkness. The man stopped at the edge of the crowd, his eyes scanning the group with a predatory intensity before he turned and fled back to his truck, disappearing into the night. I collapsed to the ground, trembling uncontrollably, as the reality of what had just transpired washed over me like a cold wave. I was safe, but I was forever changed. My clothes were torn, my heart raced with the remnants of fear, and my mind was a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. As I sat there, surrounded by the laughter of children and the comforting presence of adults, I couldn't help but ponder the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of Halloween. It wasn't just a night for costumes and candy, it was a stark reminder of the dangers that could be hidden in the shadows, waiting for the unsuspecting. I thought about the stories I had heard, real-life horrors that had unfolded on nights just like this one, tales that now felt all too real. Just weeks before, the news had reported a series of strange disappearances in our town, young people vanishing without a trace, leaving behind only questions and fear. The police had warned everyone to be cautious, urging us to stay in groups and avoid isolated areas, but it felt like a distant concern until that night when everything changed. I realized how easily a night of innocent fun could spiral into a nightmare, how quickly joy could be overshadowed by fear and uncertainty. The memories flooded back, stories of murders that had taken place in our community, of families torn apart by violence and tragedy. I thought of the girl who had gone missing last Halloween, her face plastered on flyers that still hung in local shops, a haunting reminder of the fragility of life. Each tale echoed in my mind, a stark reminder of the darkness that could seep into even the brightest moments, turning laughter into screams. As the night wore on, I found myself clinging to my friends, the warmth of their presence anchoring me to the reality of safety. We eventually made our way home, the laughter of the night replaced by a heavy silence that felt suffocating. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment in my mind like a broken record. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something far worse than just a scare. It felt as though I had danced with danger and lived to tell the tale. In the days that followed, I struggled to come to terms with what had happened. I wanted to forget, to push the memories away, but they lingered like shadows in the corners of my mind, refusing to be banished. I began to notice the news more intently, each report echoing the fear that had taken root in my heart, the world around me feeling different now, more menacing. I found myself looking over my shoulder, even in the safety of daylight, hyper-aware of the potential dangers lurking just out of sight. Halloween became a bittersweet memory, a celebration tainted by the darkness I had encountered that night. I learned to appreciate the light, to cherish the moments of joy that still existed, but I also learned to be vigilant, to recognize the shadows that could creep into our lives when we least expected it. The innocence of childhood began to fade, replaced by a cautious awareness of the world around me, a world that could turn dangerous in an instant. Years later, as I reflect on that Halloween night, I realize it was a pivotal turning point in my life. It taught me about fear, survival, and the importance of community in times of crisis. It reminded me that while darkness exists, so does light, and that we must always be vigilant, especially in a world where shadows can hide the unknown. The lessons learned that night have stayed with me, shaping the way I view the world and the people in it. And so, As Halloween approaches each year, I find myself remembering that night, not just for the fear it brought, but for the invaluable lessons it taught me about life and safety. I embrace the spirit of the season, but I do so with a heightened sense of caution, a reminder that even in the midst of celebration, we must never forget the shadows that lurk just beyond the light, waiting for the perfect moment to emerge. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I never really held a strong belief in the supernatural or the otherworldly until a series of fateful days transformed my perception and understanding forever. My adventure began when I made the impulsive decision to undertake a solo backpacking trip across Central America, a journey fueled by an earnest yearning for adventure and a much-needed break from the repetitive routines of my mundane life. The idea of exploring distant lands had always fascinated me, as travel possesses the power to awaken the spirit and ignite a sense of thrill. Little did I know that I was about to immerse myself in one of the eeriest and most haunting tales of my entire life, an experience that would forever linger in the corners of my memories. As I wandered through the vibrant streets of Oaxaca, Mexico, the air was thick with the rich tapestry of culture and history. I vividly recall how the warm sun cast a golden hue over the colorful buildings, creating a picturesque backdrop as I meandered from one artisan shop to the next. The tantalizing aromas of local cuisine wafted through the air like an inviting invitation, subtly guiding me towards bustling markets alive with handcrafted goods and homemade delicacies. The atmosphere was electrifying, yet as night gradually descended, a shroud of darkness enveloped the city, and I sensed that the ambience around me had shifted into something more enigmatic. One particular evening, as the soft twilight seeped into the horizon and began to transform the sky, I found myself in a quaint little plaza, taking in the sights and sounds of the local festivities that vibrated through the crowd. Suddenly, my attention was captured by a striking woman standing alone beneath a flickering street lamp. She was unlike anyone I had ever encountered before. Her long, dark hair cascaded down her shoulders like a flowing waterfall, while her piercing green eyes seemed to look right through me, profound and compelling. I felt an inexplicable gravitational pull towards her, as if the universe itself was urging me to make a connection. "Excuse me," I ventured, finding a strange sense of courage within me to approach her. "Do you know where I can find the best tacos around here?" With a knowing smile, her expression was enigmatic yet inviting. "Follow me," she whispered, and without a moment's hesitation, I stepped closer, drawn into her world. We walked together through narrow alleyways illuminated by the distant glow of candles and the melodic sounds of laughter cascading through the air. She led me away from the plaza until we reached a small taqueria, its unlit sign barely visible in the dim light. As we sat sharing delicious tacos, her stories captivated me completely, tales woven with spirituality, ancient myths, and the profound mysteries of the universe. I was entranced, lost in her captivating words, momentarily forgetting the outside world. Yet, just as the night began to flicker with a sense of possibility and promise, my phone buzzed loudly in my pocket, abruptly shattering the spell. It was my mother, with worries undoubtedly swirling around her thoughts. I hesitated, glancing toward my enigmatic companion, who observed me with an unreadable expression that seemed to hint at knowledge beyond words. "Maybe I should take this," I muttered reluctantly, knowing I had to return to the reality of my life. Stepping outside, I braced myself for the inevitable conversation about my whereabouts that I knew was coming. When I returned to the taqueria, the woman had vanished as if she had never existed. I searched the dimly lit streets for her figure, but found only shadows dancing beneath the pale moonlight. An unsettling feeling crept through me. Had she truly been there, or was she merely a figment of my imagination brought to life by the magic of the moment? Despite the strange occurrences of that night, I felt a calling to chase the mystery, but my mother's persistent calls pulled me back into the ordinary world where sanity reigned. Not long after that bizarre encounter, I embarked on a journey through the arid landscapes of Nevada, where I had intended to explore the vast and lonely wilderness. I had driven for countless hours, the landscape surrounding me a boundless stretch of sun-baked desert. The sun blazed unforgivingly overhead as I pulled into a rest area to stretch my legs, feeling the quiet envelop me like a heavy blanket. It was almost suffocating. Still, I appreciated the solitude, reveling in the stillness of the moment. But everything changed when a beat-up truck pulled into the lot, followed by the arrival of an older man, rugged and weathered. My curiosity piqued. I watched as he climbed out and approached me, his wild eyes darting around nervously as if he were searching for something or perhaps someone essential. "You know, kid," he drawled with an ominous tone, "these parts aren't safe. You best watch your back." Though my instincts screamed at me to leave immediately, I found myself inexplicably drawn to his raw energy, a volatile mix of fear and wisdom saturating his presence. I asked him about the area, and he began to tell me alarming tales about mysterious figures that roamed the night, men who would entice unsuspecting adventurers with promises of excitement only to lead them astray into danger. His chilling words sent shivers down my spine, but I chuckled nervously, brushing off his warnings as mere local legends. Later, as I ventured into the nearby woods, I felt an eerie unease settle over me, an invisible gaze monitoring my every move, almost as if the trees themselves held secrets I wasn't meant to uncover. I picked my way through the maze of trees, desperately trying to shake off the unsettling feeling that I was not alone. Suddenly, I heard rustling behind me. My heart raced, and when I turned around, I was met by nothing but the wind whispering through the branches. Resuming my trek, I couldn't shake the sense of another presence lurking nearby. Shadows danced in my periphery, leaving me questioning if I was seriously alone or if my imagination was running wild. I hastened my pace, and at that exact moment, I caught sight of something far away, figures watching me intently from the edge of a clearing. I squinted, desperate to comprehend, but they vanished just as quickly as I recognized their presence. Panic flooded my senses, and I fled, my adrenaline surging through my veins as I navigated the woods. A few days later, I boarded a flight bound for Europe, eager to put the bizarre incidents behind me and start anew. However, as the plane surged into the sky, something felt distinctly off. At first, I brushed the unease aside, attributing it to jet lag. Yet, the casual chatter around me shifted, thickening into a tense, weighted silence. Suddenly, a disheveled man leaped from his seat, shouting incoherently, and my heart raced in response, horror reverberating through the cabin. "Shut it down! We're going down," he screamed, panic evident in his wild eyes. Terror erupted within the cabin as other passengers instinctively recoiled from him. I felt an overwhelming dread flooding my senses, creating an electric atmosphere filled with fear, punctuated by the frantic flight attendants trying to reassure him. I was frozen in my seat, a helpless spectator to the chaos unfolding around me as the tension escalated dramatically. It was surreal. Trapped high above the clouds, I sat beside a man who seemed to have lost touch with reality entirely. The crew members struggled to control him, and I could see the faces around me pale and ashen, some silently crying while others prayed fervently for safety. Finally, a courageous passenger managed to subdue the man, dragging him away as an eerie silence filled the cabin. The tension broke, replaced only by whispered reassurances and shaky breaths. I stare out the window, the endless expanse of sky a deceptive contrast to the turmoil brewing within me. When I finally landed, relief washed over me. But the surreal events did not end there. Craving tranquility, I decided to ground myself by exploring the lush forests of Sweden, yearning for a fresh perspective to soothe my frazzled nerves. Hiking beneath towering pines, the earthy scent of the woods invigorated my spirit and brought a sense of solace. However, as the twilight approached, an unsettling sensation crept over me once again. I felt eyes upon me, as if the ancient trees had come alive with awareness. Shaking off the feeling, I pressed deeper into the heart of the forest, hoping to witness its beauty unmarred by lingering anxieties. Suddenly, I heard a soft whisper, faint yet hauntingly clear. "Turn back," it urged, its ethereal tone sending chills down my spine. My heart raced as I glanced around, but saw only shadows deepening around me, growing thicker with every heartbeat. Overcome by an overwhelming sense of dread, I decided to retrace my steps, but the path ahead appeared altered, as if the forest conspired to trap me within its depths. The once serene trails morphed into a labyrinth of confusion, each direction yielding nothing familiar. As darkness enveloped the towering pines, panic began to engulf me. I stumbled into an unmarked clearing, only to catch sight of movement, figures cloaked in shadow, standing eerily still, watching me with an intensity that turned my breath into a gasp. My heart caught in my throat as fear surged through me. I realized they were observing me, their presence magnetic yet haunting, filling the air with a palpable tension. Instinct kicked in, and I bolted into a sprint, praying the forest would guide me safely home. I could hear a rustling behind me, as if they were in pursuit, closing the distance. I darted through the trees, branches clawing at my skin while my pulse pounded violently in my ears. Eventually, I burst out of the thicket, collapsing onto a dirt path leading back to civilization. Gasping for air, I glanced back, half expecting to see those shadowy figures emerge behind me. But nothing followed. I staggered to my feet, overwhelmed yet somehow alive, and hurried back to my hostel without looking back. That night, as I lay in bed, retracing the whirlwind of my recent journey, it struck me how travel had opened doors to experiences I could have never anticipated. The thrill of adventure seemed to intermingle with an underlying threat of fear, a stark reminder that not everything in this world is designed to be understood. Reflecting upon those moments, the mysterious woman who captivated me, the frantic man on the plain, and the sinister shadows hovering in the woods, I came to realize that there is an inherent darkness in the unknown, a chilling thrill that lingers in the stories of vagabonds and wanderers. Even as I left those experiences behind, they had become etched into my memory, an indelible part of my journey through this beautifully bizarre world. And perhaps, just perhaps, that is where the true adventure lies, beyond the soothing comfort of the familiar, where shadows dance and untold mysteries await discovery. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. The cool breeze of the Californian forest welcomed me as I stepped out of my car, my backpack slung over my shoulder. It was a journey I had longed for, a solitary escape from the ceaseless hum of city life. I had dreamed about the serenity of the tall, whispering trees and the rustling leaves underfoot. Little did I know that the forest had a different story carved out for me. The first day was filled with wonder. The sunlight filtered through the canopy, creating a mosaic of light on the forest floor. I hiked for hours, my path guided by the chirping of birds and the occasional scamper of small animals, By dusk, I set up my camp near a bubbling creek, the sound of the water providing a soothing backdrop. The sky above turned a deep shade of purple, and the stars began to peek through, one by one. I felt a profound sense of peace, a connection with nature that I had not felt in years. As night fell, I made myself comfortable, the warmth of the campfire battling the cold wind. The crackling firewood and the distant hoot of an owl added to the ambience. Suddenly, I noticed a pair of eyes reflecting the firelight from across the creek. As I focused, the figures of a man and woman emerged from the shadows. They approached, their smiles too wide, eyes too keen. Our conversation was short and uncomfortable. Their vague answers about their own journey and lack of visible gear struck a chord of suspicion within me. They seemed out of place, their presence an anomaly in the serene wilderness. They left abruptly, the darkness swallowing them once more. My mind buzzed with confusion, but exhaustion pulled me into a restless sleep. The night, however, was far from peaceful. Whispers carried by the wind seemed to circle my tent. I awoke several times, clutching the hunting knife my father had gifted me. The whispers were indistinct, like fragments of a conversation just out of reach. At dawn, the whispers faded, replaced by the joyous songs of birds greeting the day. The sun's rays pierced through the trees, casting long shadows that seemed to dance with the morning mist. Packing my gear, I discovered my food supplies had been rummaged through. Missing items and the couple's unsettling presence gnawed at my nerves. Nevertheless, I pressed on, wanting to believe it was just a misunderstanding or a nocturnal animal. The day was spent traversing denser parts of the forest. The trees grew closer together, their branches intertwining overhead, creating a natural tunnel. As evening approached, I stumbled upon an old, overgrown trail. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to follow it. The path led to an open area encircled by trees so thick they formed a wall. In the center, a lone cabin stood, worn down by time. Cautiously, I approached, the eeriness of the place making the hairs on my neck stand. The door creaked open under my touch, revealing a sparsely furnished room. Cobwebs adorned every corner, and the air was stale. Among the dust-covered items, I found a journal. Its leather cover was cracked and faded, the pages yellowed with age. Flipping through its pages, a knot tightened in my stomach. The entries detailed the experiences of different hikers who had come across the cabin and the sinister events that unfolded after. Missing supplies, whispered voices, and sightings of the mysterious couple mirrored my own encounters. The final entry was a scrawl of desperation, warning to leave immediately and never return. The handwriting grew increasingly frantic, the words barely legible towards the end. Heart pounding, I left the cabin. The sun was setting, and shadows grew longer. Determined to distance myself from the cabin, I hiked until darkness set in. As I set up camp, fear twisted my gut. The journal's warnings echoed in my mind, a harbinger of the night's events. The forest, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap, its silence oppressive. Once again, whispers surrounded my tent. This time, they were closer, more insistent. Footsteps crunched the leaves just beyond the firelight. My breath hitched as I saw the couple at the edge of my camp, their eyes glinting menacingly. They didn't approach but stood there, watching. Their presence was a silent threat, their expressions unreadable in the flickering firelight. Dread paralyzed me until the first light of dawn broke through the trees. The couple vanished with the darkness, leaving an unsettling silence. Exhausted and scared, I made the decision to leave the forest. Hastily packing, I retraced my steps, every snap of a twig causing my heart to leap. The journey back was grueling, my senses heightened, every rustle of leaves a potential threat. The 2-day hike out of the forest was a blur of anxiety. I felt eyes on me constantly, heard the whispers even in broad daylight. Relief flooded me as I finally reached my car, but the fear lingered, an unwelcome companion. The drive back to the city was long and silent, the events of the past days replaying in my mind. Back in the city, the experience haunted me. Sleepless nights were filled with the imagined whispers and glinting eyes. The forest, once a symbol of peace, had turned into a source of unending dread. The memories clung to me, a dark shadow over my daily life. I found myself avoiding parks and wooded areas, the thought of trees and shadows sending chills down my spine. Years later, a similar tale reached me. A couple in Arkansas had a disturbing encounter during their hike, a green tent with the carcass of a mutilated deer inside. They fled, avoiding further danger, but left with a scar on their memories. The story resonated with me, a chilling reminder of my own ordeal. The wilderness holds many secrets, some better left unknown. My journey had started with a quest for tranquility but ended in a lifelong unease. I will always wonder about the couple in the forest and the true nature of their intent. The whispers of the wilderness have forever marked my soul, a persistent reminder of the unknown lurking just beyond the veil of nature. The forest, with its ancient trees and hidden paths, remains a place of mystery and fear, its secrets forever etched in my memory. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I have always been drawn to the tranquility and beauty of nature. The deep forests, the towering mountains, and the gentle streams have always offered a sense of escape from the hustle and bustle of city life. The Appalachian Mountains in Georgia, with their endless stretches of wilderness, are among the most enchanting places I've visited. But behind that natural splendor lies a different, more sinister layer of reality, one that I experienced firsthand and that continues to haunt my nights. It all started when a few friends and I decided to go on a camping trip in the Chattahoochee National Forest, an expansive part of the Appalachian Range. Our plan was simple: escape our stressful lives for a weekend, bask in the beauty of nature, and perhaps enjoy some hiking and fishing. Little did we know, our trip would bring us much more than we ever bargained for. We arrived at the forest on a crisp autumn afternoon. The leaves had turned into magnificent hues of red, orange, and yellow, creating a picturesque landscape. We set up our tents in a small clearing not too far from a bubbling creek, the kind of peaceful spot campers dream of. As the sun began to set, we built a fire, roasted marshmallows, and shared ghost stories. We laughed at the absurdity of our fears, finding comfort in each other's company. However, as the night deepened, the forest's demeanor began to change. The joyful crackling of our fire seemed to be swallowed by the encroaching darkness, and a heavy, oppressive feeling settled over our campsite. It was around midnight when we first noticed it, a soft, eerie light flickering through the trees, casting long, dancing shadows around us. At first, we thought it was the reflection of the moon or perhaps another group of campers, but the light was strange and unnatural, almost otherworldly. It seemed to move with intent, drifting closer and closer to our campsite, yet always staying just out of reach. We tried to dismiss it, convincing ourselves it was nothing but a trick of the light. But then came the laughter. Soft, haunting giggles that seemed to emanate from the darkness around us. It wasn't the joyous laughter of people having fun, but something colder, more sinister. It echoed through the trees, surrounding us, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Despite the fire's warmth, a cold sweat broke out on my skin. We huddled closer together, each of us scanning the forest with terrified eyes, desperately trying to locate the source of the laughter. But there was nothing visible, nothing we could confront or reason with. The giggling continued for what felt like an eternity before gradually fading away, leaving us in terrified silence. None of us managed to sleep that night. We sat by the dwindling fire, clutching our flashlights, waiting for dawn. As soon as the first light of day pierced through the trees, we packed up our camp and left, a mutual, unspoken decision. The forest's daytime serenity was not enough to erase the terror of the night. Our experience in Chattahoochee National Forest became a tale we rarely discussed, a shared nightmare we avoided bringing up. But the memory lingered, a constant reminder of the mysteries lurking in the woods. That trip taught me that some parts of the wilderness are best left unexplored. Years later, I found myself in Tennessee, seeking solitude and a simpler life. I rented an old cabin in a remote part of the state, nestled between the undulating hills and dense forests of the Appalachian Mountains. The cabin was quaint and charming, a perfect retreat from the noise of the modern world. Little did I know, the solace I sought would soon be shattered. The first few weeks in the cabin were blissful. I spent my days hiking the winding trails, fishing in the clear streams, and enjoying the peace and quiet that city life never afforded. But as I grew more attuned to the rhythm of the forest, I started noticing oddities. At night, as I lay in bed, I would hear footsteps crunching on the gravel outside, slow and deliberate. The first time I heard it, I assumed it was a deer or some other nocturnal creature. But the footsteps were too heavy, too precise. One night, while I was reading by the fireplace, I heard my name being called. At first, it came as a soft whisper, barely louder than the wind rustling through the trees. I dismissed it as my imagination. But the whispers grew more frequent, insistent, always just outside my window, or echoing down the hallway when I was trying to sleep. They were never clear, always fading in and out as if carried by the wind. And they always said the same thing, "Come out." My dreams became plagued by these same whispers, beckoning me into the forest. In these dreams, I walked through the moonlit woods, following a path that seemed to be made of glowing light. The deeper I went, the louder the whispers became, until they were a cacophony of voices calling my name. Each time, I would wake up in a cold sweat just before reaching a clearing where shadowy figures waited. One particularly stormy night, I was jolted awake by a loud bang on my front door. The wind howled outside, and rain pounded against the cabin, but amid the storm, I could hear the familiar whispers. Bracing myself, I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously opened the door. There was nothing but the storm raging outside, yet the whispers seemed to swirl around me, carried by the wind and rain. I shut the door quickly, my heart pounding. The next morning, I found strange footprints around the cabin, larger than any animal I had seen in the area. They seemed to start and stop abruptly, as if whoever, or whatever, had made them could vanish into thin air. The realization that I was being watched, hunted even, filled me with a deep, primal fear. Desperate for answers, I confided in a local shopkeeper, an elderly man who had lived in the area his entire life. When I mentioned the whispers and the footsteps, his face grew pale. He told me about the legends of the Appalachian Mountains, stories of spirits and ancient entities that roamed the forests, seeking to lure the unwary to their doom. He warned me to be cautious and advised me to leave if the occurrences did not stop. Despite his advice, I returned to the cabin, determined to face whatever was happening. That night, the whispers were louder than ever, swirling around the cabin, calling my name incessantly. Fear and frustration boiled over, and I stormed outside, screaming into the night, demanding to know what they wanted. The forest fell eerily silent, and for a moment, I thought I had driven them away. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure standing at the edge of the trees. It was tall and shadowy, with glowing eyes that pierced through the darkness. It said nothing, just stood there, watching me. Terror gripped me like a vice, and I stumbled back into the cabin, locking the door behind me. I didn't sleep that night, or the nights that followed. The figure continued to appear, sometimes alone, sometimes with others, standing in the shadows at the edge of the forest. The whispers became a constant, ever-present noise, eroding my sanity. My dreams were filled with their relentless calls, dragging me towards that clearing in the forest. Unable to bear it any longer, I decided to leave the cabin. The once charming retreat had become a prison, its tranquility tainted by the supernatural terror that stalked me. As I drove away, I felt a heavy weight lift from my shoulders, but the whispers and the figure's glowing eyes remained etched in my mind, a haunting reminder of the unknown lurking in the wilderness. Each story, whether in Georgia's Chattahoochee National Forest or the remote cabin in Tennessee, revealed a shared truth: the natural world holds mysteries and terrors beyond our understanding. The Appalachian Mountains, with their ancient trees and hidden paths, are not just a refuge for those seeking peace, but also a realm of unseen forces that can turn serenity into a nightmare. The whispers in the darkness and the figures in the shadows have forever marked my soul, a persistent reminder of the unknown that lies just beyond the veil of nature. The experience in the Chattahoochee National Forest was one that I thought I could leave behind, but it was not so simple. The memory of that eerie light and the sinister laughter stayed with me. I would often wake up in the middle of the night, the sound of those haunting giggles echoing in my mind. My friends and I had made an unspoken pact never to talk about that night, but it was clear that it had affected all of us deeply. We avoided camping trips and even day hikes in dense forests, the fear of encountering something similar too great to ignore. When I moved to Tennessee, I hoped that the change of scenery would help me forget. The cabin was supposed to be my sanctuary, a place where I could find peace and reconnect with nature in a positive way. For a while, it was. The days were filled with the simple pleasures of life, tending to a small garden, exploring the nearby trails, and enjoying the quiet solitude. But as the weeks passed, the oddities began to surface, slowly at first, but with increasing intensity. The footsteps outside my cabin were the first sign. They were so deliberate and heavy that I couldn't attribute them to any animal I knew of. Each night, they grew closer, circling the cabin as if whatever was out there was trying to find a way in. The whispers started soon after, always calling my name, always just out of sight. They seemed to come from the very walls of the cabin, echoing down the hallway and seeping into my dreams. In my dreams, I was always drawn to the forest, following a path that glowed with an ethereal light. The whispers were louder there, more insistent, and I could feel the presence of those shadowy figures waiting for me. Each time, I would wake up just before reaching them, my heart pounding and my body drenched in sweat. The fear was so real, so palpable, that it began to affect my waking life. I became paranoid, constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every sound. The night of the storm was the breaking point. The loud bang on the door jolted me awake, and the whispers were louder than ever, swirling around me like a malevolent wind. When I opened the door, the storm outside seemed to amplify the whispers, making them almost deafening. The footprints I found the next morning were the final straw. They were unlike anything I had ever seen, and the realization that I was being watched, that something was hunting me, was too much to bear. The shopkeeper's warning about the legends of the Appalachian Mountains only confirmed my worst fears. The spirits and ancient entities he spoke of were not just stories, they were real, and they were targeting me. Despite his advice to leave, I felt a strange compulsion to stay, to face whatever was happening. But that night, when the whispers reached a fever pitch and I saw the figure with glowing eyes, I knew I couldn't stay any longer. The decision to leave the cabin was not an easy one. It had been my dream to live a simple, peaceful life in the mountains, but that dream had turned into a nightmare. As I drove away, I felt a sense of relief, but also a deep sadness. The whispers in the figure's eyes were a constant reminder of the unknown, of the mysteries and terrors that lurked just beyond the veil of nature. The Appalachian Mountains, with their ancient trees and hidden paths, had shown me a side of the natural world that I would never forget. The experience had forever marked my soul, a persistent reminder of the unknown that lies just beyond our understanding. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. It all began one fateful evening when I received an unexpected message from an acquaintance named Matt. He was notorious in our circles for his wild conspiracy theories, often diving deep into the uncharted territories of the internet that most people dared not explore. Intrigued by his reputation and the mystery that surrounded him, I opened his message, which unfolded into a request that would ultimately shake the very foundation of my understanding of safety, justice, and the lengths to which people would go to protect their secrets. "Ryan," he wrote, "I need your help. There's a farmer named George who's at odds with a corporation. They're trying to take his land under dubious circumstances. I want you to look into it." I hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of his request settle heavily on my shoulders. I'd heard whispers of the deep web, the dark side of the internet where anonymity ruled and dangerous dealings thrived in the shadows. It was a realm where the law often felt irrelevant, and the consequences of curiosity could be dire. Yet, despite my apprehension, Matt's plea sparked a curiosity within me that was hard to resist. I had always considered myself a seeker of truth, a hidden gem of journalism buried beneath layers of mundane stories and trivial news. This felt like an opportunity to uncover something significant. The very next day, I found myself driving to George's farm, my mind racing with questions about what I might uncover. It was an expansive property, dotted with crops that seemed to stand like sentinels against the horizon, guarding secrets that had yet to be revealed. As I introduced myself to George, I could see the weight of the world resting heavily on his shoulders. We sat on his dilapidated porch, and he recounted his struggles in a voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. "They want me off my land because of something buried beneath it," he said, his eyes darting nervously as if he were afraid of being overheard. What could possibly be beneath this land? My instincts tingled with unease. I offered to help him, and with that simple promise, my journey into the shadows began. I delved into records, trying to uncover the corporation's motives, examining land deeds, financial reports, and any public records I could find. The more I searched, the more layers of the story began to unravel, revealing a complex tapestry woven with deceit and greed. Late one night, while scouring the depths of online forums and encrypted chat rooms, I stumbled upon a thread discussing missing children's cases that were linked to drug trafficking. As I scrolled through the posts, a chilling realization hit me. The very same corporation attempting to seize George's land was mentioned in these dark discussions. It felt like a thread pulling me deeper into a quagmire I neither wanted nor could escape. The implications were staggering, and I knew I had stumbled upon something much larger than I had initially anticipated. Days turned into weeks as I meticulously pieced together evidence, all of which pointed to something far more sinister than I had ever imagined. I managed to obtain documents that suggested a network involved in the illicit drug trade, with connections to powerful individuals who were likely untouchable by the law. It was a web of treachery that included politicians, local law enforcement, and corporate executives, all playing their part in this ruthless game. The realization that I was up against such formidable forces sent shivers down my spine. Through it all, my conversations with Matt grew increasingly paranoid, laden with conspiracy theories that seemed far-fetched yet eerily plausible. "They're watching you, Ryan," he warned one evening over a secure call, his voice low and urgent. "You're getting too close." His words echoed in my mind, weaving a tapestry of fear that began to suffocate my reality. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being monitored, that every move I made was being scrutinized by unseen eyes. Determined to see justice for George, I meticulously planned to confront officials with my collected evidence. But it wasn't long before the shadows that I thought were merely specters of my imagination grew tangible. Strange cars started appearing outside my apartment, following me from the farm to the city. My heart raced every time I left my home, a constant reminder that I had ventured too deep into a world that didn't take kindly to intruders. The sense of dread hung over me like a dark cloud, threatening to engulf me at any moment. One night, after a particularly intense meeting with George, where we had discussed further steps to protect his land, I returned home exhausted but resolute. As I entered my apartment, a chill swept through me. The door was ajar. My breath caught in my throat, and panic surged within me. Cautiously, I pushed it open and stepped inside, my heart pounding loudly in my chest. My place had been ransacked. Papers were strewn everywhere, and in an instant, the hard drive containing all my findings flashed through my mind, a fragile vessel of hope now compromised and possibly lost forever. With desperation clawing at my insides, I gathered what I could, knowing that keeping this information secret was no longer safe. The very people I was investigating were onto me, and I could feel their intent pressing down on me like a vice, suffocating my resolve. I had to act quickly and decisively. With Matt's guidance, I organized the evidence into a secure file, making sure to encrypt everything to protect it from prying eyes. I couldn't trust anyone else. My instincts told me they were all part of this insidious operation, and I had to rely solely on myself. The following day, I decided it was time to go to the police. I had to confront the danger head-on, despite the terrifying weight it carried. The police station loomed before me like a fortress, its imposing structure a symbol of authority and order. I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve before stepping inside. As I explained my findings to an officer, I watched their reaction closely, searching for any signs of disbelief or skepticism. But they listened, their expressions shifting from mere amusement to concern as I laid out the evidence before them. I left the station, my heart pounding in my chest. I had done my part. Escape was the next urge that tugged at me, but the more I retreated, the more I felt the oppressive darkness closing in. On my way home, panic set in when a black SUV pulled up behind me, its tinted windows obscuring the faces within. My heart raced as I quickened my pace, blending into a crowd, my only sanctuary. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being hunted, a prey in a game I had unwittingly entered. Days trickled by in a haze of anxiety as I waited for updates from the police, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Meanwhile, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being hunted. Every shadow seemed to whisper threats, every alley felt like a trap waiting to ensnare me. I spent restless nights haunting the internet forums, searching for any news related to the case, hoping to find protective information on George's plight that could help us both. One evening, a chilling post caught my eye. It detailed a group bent on silencing whistleblowers, paying hefty sums for removing them from the narrative. My blood ran cold. My name was in the public domain, shared amongst conspirators who would stop at nothing to protect their interests. I felt like a rat in a cage, no more holes to escape through, no way out of this nightmare. Realizing that I had to act, I devised a plan. I needed to alert the media, to bring the story to the forefront of public consciousness. I reached out to a local journalist, someone I trusted implicitly, and explained the precarious situation I found myself in. The weight of the world lingered on my shoulders as we discussed potential angles for a story that could expose the conspiracy and bring justice to those affected. Finally, the article went live, a bombshell that made waves across social media platforms, drawing attention from all corners. Readers joined the chorus, demanding justice for the missing children and accountability for the corporation that had been operating in the shadows for far too long. My hope was ignited. Perhaps there was a way to shine light on the darkness I had unearthed and bring about real change. However, as the article spread like wildfire, so did the threat against me. I started receiving anonymous messages warning me to back off or face dire consequences. My heart raced. I knew I was in their crosshairs now. I had awakened a monster, and it thrived in shadows, feeding on fear and silence. Even still, I refused to shrink away from the truth. With the support of others rallying against the injustice, I began organizing a protest outside the corporation's headquarters. I wanted to make noise, to demand transparency and bring attention to the farmers like George, whose lives were torn apart by greed and corruption. The thought of standing alongside others who shared my determination filled me with a renewed sense of purpose. The day of the protest was a surreal experience, a whirlwind of emotions as I held a sign that read "Our land, our children." I marched alongside activists, feeling a shared determination thrumming through the crowd. The energy crackled with a promise of change, and I hoped that maybe, just maybe, we would break through the darkness that had enveloped so many lives. As we chanted and marched, I could feel eyes upon us, those from the corporation, judging our every move, their presence a constant reminder of the danger we faced. I knew the threat was real as they stood on the fringes, watching, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Yet, the thrill of standing for something greater drowned out my fears, igniting a fire within me that I had never felt before. Days turned into weeks as the protests continued, gaining traction and drawing more attention. Media coverage brought light to the story and kept the pressure on local authorities to act. Slowly but surely, the police began to act upon the evidence we compiled, launching a full-scale investigation into the corporation's illicit activities and the network of corruption that had allowed them to operate unchecked. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a breakthrough occurred. Authorities arrested several key figures involved in the drug trafficking network, explorers of the dark side that had long been hidden from view. I could hardly contain my elation as the news spread like wildfire, igniting hope in the hearts of those who had long suffered in silence. But even in triumph, shadows lingered. I still had to watch my back, knowing that they were not finished. The fight had only just begun. As I wrote this, I realized I had emerged as a target, a person whose courage had stirred the monster from its den, awakening forces that would stop at nothing to silence me. Yet, I also felt transformed, a witness to the fragility and resilience of truth. The deep web had revealed to me not just the darkness, but the strength required to illuminate it. I would continue to stand against those who masked their intentions in shadows, gathering others brave enough to step into the light and join the fight for justice. This story isn't just mine, it belongs to everyone swept up in the chaos of secrecy and power. And as long as we breathe, We will refuse to be silenced, for together, we are stronger than the darkness that seeks to envelop us. We will shine a light on the truth, no matter the cost. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I had always found myself irresistibly drawn to the internet's shadowy corners, those hidden realms where the light of conventional knowledge barely penetrated. The deep web beckoned me like a siren, whispering promises of forbidden knowledge and tantalizing secrets that lay far beyond the sterile and mundane surface web that most people occupied. I spent countless nights engrossed in various forums, engaging with others who were equally captivated by the thrill of anonymity and the allure of the unknown. Little did I know that my insatiable curiosity would ultimately lead me down a treacherous path filled with horrors that would far exceed my comprehension. It all began one fateful night, a night that would forever alter the course of my life, when I stumbled across a link in a dimly lit chat room. The link appeared as just a string of random characters, but something deep within me screamed to click on it. My heart raced with a mix of fear and excitement as a dark page opened before me, adorned with unsettling imagery and cryptic text that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The page contained an input box, challenging me to submit a phrase that, if correct, would grant me access to untold secrets hidden in the depths of the internet. Against my better judgment and fueled by a reckless desire for discovery, I typed in the words "truth reveals," pressing enter without a second thought. The screen flickered ominously, and I watched in a mix of horror and fascination as it transformed before my eyes. A series of disturbing videos began to load, each more unsettling than the last. They depicted grotesque human experiments, conducted in dimly lit laboratories where the line between science and insanity blurred until it became almost indistinguishable. I felt a nagging dread settle in my gut as the subjects writhed in agony, trapped in a twisted quest for knowledge or power that seemed to have no moral boundaries. As I continued clicking through the videos, a deeper sense of unease settled in my gut, like a heavy stone that refused to dislodge. It wasn't just the horrific content that disturbed me, it was the unsettling realization that I was not alone in this digital abyss. I sensed a presence watching me, lurking just beyond the shadows of my screen, and my heart thumped wildly in my chest as I told myself it was merely paranoia. After all, I was just a faceless figure behind the glow of a computer screen, hidden from the world outside. I tried to shake off the feeling, diving back into the abyss of videos and images. Yet, with each click, it became harder to ignore that chilling sensation creeping up my spine. Then came a moment that froze my blood in my veins. One video, more polished than the others, featured a symbol that sent shivers down my spine. It was a sigil, some intricate design I had seen before while reading about occult practices and dark rituals. It belonged to a cult rumored to operate in the depths of the deep web, a group that thrived on fear and manipulation. This surreal realization crashed over me like an icy wave. I was not merely an observer in this twisted world. I was a target, marked by forces I could barely comprehend. Panic took hold of me, and I attempted to log off, desperate to escape the horrors I had unleashed upon myself. But as soon as I did, my screen flickered violently, as if responding to my fear. A message appeared, bold and red: "You shouldn't have looked for the truth." In that instant, time felt suspended. My breath hitched in my throat as the weight of those words pressed down on me like a heavy shroud. I was in it now. I had crossed a line from which I couldn't return, and there was no going back. A quick inspection of my surroundings reassured me of my physical safety, but I felt the invisible fingers of dread wrap around my throat, squeezing tighter with each passing moment. My phone buzzed suddenly, a shocking interruption that made me jump. A text notification flashed on my screen, an unknown number, "We see you." I stumbled back from my desk as if struck by lightning. Could this be a twisted prank, a cruel joke played by someone who had stumbled upon my curiosity? The rational part of my mind struggled against the encroaching shadows of fear that threatened to consume me. I debated calling the police, but deep down, I knew that in a world this dark, any help would likely come too late, or not at all. My instincts told me that I was dealing with something far more sinister than a mere prank. I took a deep breath, trying to collect my thoughts and regain some semblance of control. I needed to act, to hide, to protect myself from whatever darkness loomed just beyond my reach. Rushing through my apartment, I closed the curtains tightly, dimming the light and creating a cocoon of safety around me. I was burning with anxiety, my mind racing through the recent events that had spiraled out of control. How could I have been so naive? I had opened a door to a realm that thrived on fear and suffering, and now, it seemed as if that very door had been flung wide open, inviting chaos into my life. Hours passed in a haze, the weight of dread pressing down on me like a suffocating blanket as I fought against the silence that enveloped my home. The world outside felt foreign, sinister, and threatening, as if the very air was charged with malevolence. I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were watching me, hidden in the shadows just beyond my reach, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Then my phone buzzed again, and my heart raced in response. I hesitated before checking. What more could they want from me? My hands trembled as I picked it up, bracing myself for the worst. The message was simple, yet it sent chills down my spine. "We will find you." I felt bile rise in my throat, the taste of fear bitter and acrid. I was being hunted by an entity whose very existence seemed to shatter the boundaries of what I thought was real. The minutes dragged into hours, and my mind began to unravel, a tapestry of terror woven with threads of anxiety and despair. I couldn't help but think of the videos, the experiments, the people, what had happened to them. Were they still alive, held captive somewhere just beyond my comprehension, their fates intertwined with my own? Reality felt like a fragile construct, a house of cards teetering on the brink of collapse as I sank deeper into despair. Every creak of my apartment filled me with dread, each sound amplified in the oppressive silence. Why had I ever clicked that link? Committing that single act of curiosity had now turned my life into a waking nightmare, a descent into madness from which there seemed to be no escape. Suddenly, my computer screen flared back to life, startling me from my thoughts. I hadn't touched it, and I knew I had shut it down, yet there it was, an ominous glow that illuminated my darkened room, casting eerie shadows on the walls. My heart raced as I leaned closer, my breath catching in my throat. A new video began playing, a live feed from an unknown location that sent a jolt of terror through me. The grainy footage showed several individuals, their faces obscured by heavy masks, gathered in a lonely, darkened chamber. I felt entranced, unable to look away even as I sensed the weight of impending doom pressing down on me like a vice. One of the masked figures raised their hand, signaling to someone, off-screen. My breath hitched as a figure stepped into the frame. It was a woman, her expression blank and unreadable, yet the deep hollows under her eyes hinted at unspeakable suffering. She wore a hospital gown, and my heart dropped as I recognized her from one of the earlier videos. She had been a subject in the horrific experiments that had plagued my mind. My pulse quickened as I realized the gravity of the situation. I was witnessing something far darker than I had ever imagined. The figures surrounding her began to chant in a language I couldn't comprehend, their voices rising and falling like a sinister melody. A chill ran down my spine as I realized that I was witnessing a ritual of sorts, one that invoked power and darkness, tapping into realms best left unexplored. My mind screamed for me to turn away, to sever the connection, but I was immobilized, trapped in the horror playing before me, unable to escape the inevitable. Then, everything shifted in an instant. The feed glitched, and I saw their eyes, cold, empty, and knowing. They were aware of me, and in the depths of my terror, I realized I was not just a passive viewer, I was part of their twisted agenda. They had sought me out, drawn me in, and now they were preparing to claim me as one of their own. Adrenaline surged through my veins like fire, igniting a primal instinct to survive. I leaped from my chair and grabbed my phone, scrambling to find a way out of this digital prison that had ensnared me. I needed to escape, to break free from the chains of fear that bound me. With shaking hands, I closed my laptop and grabbed my coat, heading for the door with a sense of urgency that propelled me forward. I had to get out and disappear, to vanish into the night like a whisper in the wind. As I reached for the doorknob, a deafening noise erupted from my phone, the ringer blaring like a siren, drowning out my thoughts and fears. I hesitated to answer, dread pooling in my stomach like a heavy stone, but something compelled me to. Seeing an unknown number flash on the screen again, I swallowed hard, preparing for the worst, knowing that my life hung in the balance. "Is this you?" a voice crackled through the line, low and sinister. It sent a jolt through me, freezing me in place, paralyzing my thoughts with fear. "Who is this?" I stammered, my voice shaking like a fragile leaf in a storm. "You have something we want, and if you don't want to see what happens to the girl on the screen, you better cooperate," the voice hissed, dripping with malice. A chill swept over me as the gravity of their threat sank in like a heavy anchor, pulling me down into the depths of despair. Before I could respond, the call disconnected, leaving only a low, mocking laugh echoing in my ears, a haunting reminder of my helplessness. I was paralyzed, caught in a web of terror woven by unseen hands, feeling the weight of despair pressing down on me, dark and oppressive, suffocating my spirit. I had uncovered something beyond my understanding, tangled in a conspiracy that wove itself into the very fabric of reality. Government secrets, lost knowledge, and a clandestine cult seeking to harness unfathomable powers were closing in on me, their tendrils reaching out from the shadows. I had become the unwitting participant in a game far older and darker than I could have ever imagined, a pawn in a twisted chess match where the stakes were my very existence. As the minutes passed, I knew I needed to do the unthinkable. I had to leave everything behind. My home, my identity, everything I knew was now tainted by this dark brush, stained with the horrors I had witnessed. There was only one option left, to invoke the same anonymity I had willingly embraced in pursuit of the truth, to become a ghost in the digital landscape. With newfound determination, I gathered only the essentials, my phone, a small amount of cash, and a few personal items, and slipped out the back door, hoping to evade the already waiting eyes that I felt were watching my every move. I moved through back alleys, drawn deeper into the shadows, the city lights casting ominous shapes across my path. I couldn't shake the feeling of being pursued, the knowledge that they could be right behind me, watching every step I took with malicious intent. As I wandered through the chaos of the city, I came across an underground community, a network of individuals who had also delved too deeply into the dark web, each with their own stories of terror, survival, and secrets hidden away from the prying eyes of the world. Maybe they could help me disappear, help me find a way to escape the clutches of the darkness that threatened to consume me whole. With trembling hands, I reached out to them through encrypted channels, sharing my horrifying experience while seeking refuge from the storm that raged within me. To my relief, they responded quickly, guiding me through the steps needed to erase my digital presence, to become a ghost among the living, hidden from those who sought to harm me. I took every precaution, meticulously severing ties with my past life. It was a painful process, filled with second-guessing and sleepless nights, but I knew there was no turning back. Each file deleted, each social media account disabled was a step farther from the nightmare threatening to engulf me, a small victory against the overwhelming tide of fear that sought to drown me. As I settled into my new life, I couldn't escape the lingering thoughts that kept me awake at night, haunting my dreams like a specter. The woman in the video haunted my thoughts, her hollow eyes searching for solace in a world that had turned its back on her. What had happened to her? Was she still alive, still trapped within that dark chamber of secrets, her fate intertwined with mine? I had been too focused on preserving my own existence to consider the fates of those who had crossed the cult's path before me, their lives reduced to mere footnotes in a story that was far from over. Despite my best efforts to move forward, thoughts of the cult clung to me like a shadow, refusing to let go. Whispers on forums hinted at their growing influence, their machinations reaching farther than I initially realized, with implications that spiraled into the highest echelons of power and secrecy. My cowardice knotted in my gut, driving me to the precipice of dread, a relentless reminder that I could never truly escape the darkness that lurked just beyond my reach. After months of hiding, I decided I had to investigate further, to confront the demons that haunted me. I yearned to uncover the truth that had ensnared me, to find answers for the nameless victims whose lives had been shattered by the machinations of the cult. So, I gathered what little intel I could through my underground network, focusing on the cult's intricate web and its potential ties to governmental corruption that ran deeper than I could have ever imagined. Late one night, fueled by a mixture of fear and determination, I cracked the code of a forum dedicated to documenting the cult's secrets and searching for those who had gone missing. As I read through personal accounts, clippings, and mentioned names, the pieces slowly began to align, forming a tapestry of horror that made my blood run cold. The truth, twisted and convoluted, hinted at an overwhelming conspiracy that reached into the very heart of society. With renewed determination, I delved deeper, piecing together stories and breadcrumbs that led me to an abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. This was rumored to be one of the cult's meeting sites, where they conducted rituals cloaked in secrecy and darkness. My pulse quickened as I approached, every instinct telling me to turn around, to flee, but a morbid curiosity pulled me forward, urging me to uncover the truth that lay hidden within those crumbling walls. Inside the dilapidated structure, shadows danced across the walls as the faint moonlight filtered through cracked windows, casting eerie shapes that seemed to mock my presence. Each creaking floorboard sounded as loud as thunder in the silence, heightening my senses and threatening to alert anyone within of my presence. I had come too far to turn back now. I needed answers, closure, something to drive away the gnawing fear that clawed at my mind like a hungry beast. As I ventured deeper into the building, I stumbled upon a makeshift altar surrounded by strange symbols painted on the walls, remnants of a dark past that clung to the air like a foul stench. It was here that they held their rituals, the remnants of their female sacrifices still stained the ground, a grotesque testament to their horrifying practices. My heart raced at the unsettling sight, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I realized the true extent of the darkness that had taken root in this place. Suddenly, I heard voices coming from the adjacent room, low and conspiratorial. I pressed myself against the wall, the peeling paint scratching against my skin, straining to catch snippets of conversation. They spoke of something greater, a prophecy that foretold their ascendance, the sacrifice of a chosen few to unlock hidden powers that had long been buried by time. My heart raced as I realized the stakes of what I was witnessing. I had stumbled into a den of monsters. With each passing second, I felt the darkness close in, threatening to engulf me in the very shadows I sought to unearth. It was a relentless reminder that knowledge came with a cost, and some truths were better left buried in the depths of oblivion. I knew then that I was treading on dangerous ground, and the weight of my discovery pressed down on me like a heavy burden. That night would forever change me, marking a turning point in my life. I left the cult's dark gathering behind, feeling the weight of 1,000 secrets pressing upon my heart, threatening to crush me under their enormity. In those twisted depths, I had discovered the truth, but I also uncovered a haunting reality. Sometimes, when you seek the truth, it seeks you back, pulling you into its dark embrace. The abyss that I had peered into was more than a frightening tale. It was a warning, an omen of the terror that lurked just out of sight. I was forever entwined in a web of shadows, and I knew that their gaze would forever linger, a constant reminder of the darkness that lay just beyond my reach. As I fled into the night, the chaos of my thoughts swirling around me like a tempest, I carried with me the consequences of my choices. The deep web had entangled me in a conspiracy that went beyond any single individual. It reached into the very marrow of society, infecting everything it touched with its malevolence. I could never escape the fear that pulsed in my veins, a constant reminder that somewhere, someone was still watching, waiting, cloaked in darkness. And though I had evaded them for now, I knew I would never really be free. Alright, that's the end of today's story. Thank you for joining me on this thrilling journey through the shadows of life and death. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the little bell to get more spine-chilling tales from Whisper of Horror. Remember, every soul has a story, and here, we give them a voice. See you next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and keep whispering horror.